Well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. For those that haven't read up on the film yet, can you tell us what Red Snow is about in a nutshell?
Yeah, it's about a struggling vampire romance novelist, Olivia, who is facing a lot of rejection. She can't get her manuscript published, and it's around Christmas time, and she's in her cabin alone. And she comes to face with a real life vampire, and it's at first it's this thrill for her. It's like a dream come true, but the dream sort of turns into a nightmare as she realizes that vampires are bloodthirsty monsters and maybe not as sweet and romantic as she thought that they would be. So yeah, it's a Christmas vampire film, I guess, in a nutshell.
And I mean, where did the idea come from? Because it's not your quote unquote traditional vampire story.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to say exactly where it came from. I think it was a number of things. I think part of it was I'd always wanted to make a vampire film, but and I grew up with things like The Lost Boys and Fright Night, and I think for me the reason I stayed away from it for so long is I felt like I didn't really have an original angle on it. Like I wanted to be able to contribute something kind of unique to the subgenre because I love it so much. And yeah, I think just, it's a merging of two of my favorite horror subgenres, which is like Christmas horror and vampire horror. And I felt like that hadn't really been done. And just thinking of these two actors, Dennice and Nico, I've known for a very long time, who play the leads. I very much built these parts around them, and so it was great. It was a chance to make a vampire film and a Christmas film, and to direct two of my dear friends in a project. So it was kind of a dream come true in a lot of ways.
And I mean, Nico does spend, some of the film, wearing not very much. So I'm guessing, the fact that, you were friends, was he flattered, or, how did you?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be in my film, but, there's going to be, get down the gym, mate.
Yeah, I definitely gave him a heads up about that. It does help to know someone before getting them into something like this. I told him, it's going to be very cold. You're not going to be wearing very much. In one scene, nothing at all. But no, he was very game. He was. I think the toughest scenes for him were when he's got the fake blood all over himself, because the cold plus having all this sticky goo all over you is quite unpleasant. And he was a real trooper throughout all of that. And I guess it did help that we were friends before all this. And we're still friends, which is nice. Even after torturing him in the snow.
Sort of sticking loosely with costume. I mean, horror fans are going to have, a field day with some of Olivia's clothes. I mean, that Nosferatu sweater. I mean, where did you guys find these things? Because, I think like half of London Square, Leicester Square, is going to be wanting one of them after this screening.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Alex, our costume designer, is responsible for a lot of that stuff. Some things were written into the script, like the Nosferatu thing was just so we could have that bit about Luke pretending to be offended by it. But yeah, a lot of things were found secondhand. Places like Etsy provided the Lake Tahoe sweater. Yeah, it was kind of and we had like a fun day of Nico modeling different women's clothing just to lock in the right look. Like that big fur coat that he wears was definitely something that came about in that process. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with the costumes on this one.
I mean, I was reading that it was a super short shoot. What challenges does that throw up? Because there's a lot of setups. There's a lot of pieces to this film.
Yeah, absolutely. We basically were in Tahoe for 12 days, and that was all pre-pandemic. And that was really the bulk of the movie. We always knew that we were going to do one pickup day, which is basically the scene in the bookstore and the scenes with basically all the scenes with Simon, the Severon group guy. And so the scenes in his office and the scenes in the bookstore, unfortunately, we got back from shooting and then the pandemic hit, and we waited a long time to grab those last little bits until we thought it was safe to do so. But in terms of challenges, I think it helped that it was mostly one location, but a lot of that was just preparing with my cinematographer, Gavin. We shot listed the entire movie and rehearsed with the actors, or rather the actors mostly had to rehearse with each other since they were in LA and I was in the Bay Area. But just going in as fully prepared as we could be and kind of scouting the location in advance. And because once you're there, things will go wrong. And just as long as you have as many contingencies in place as possible and have a very set idea of what you're doing. And it also just helped that this crew, it was a very small crew. It was about 11 people on the crew. They were all very professional and very much doing it out of, love of movie making. So, and everyone was just very prepared. So I think that helped, even though it was a pretty grueling, fast-paced shoot where, we were doing 8 pages a day sometimes, or just tons of setups in a single day. I think the hardest bits were when we were shooting out in the snow, like long action sequences, because then it's like the cold and kind of racing against the elements, and also stunts, and it's just kind of like in makeup effects. It's just kind of like, how many things can we stack on top of each other and still make this work? But we managed to pull it off, and I'm very grateful for that.
I mean, vampires, in film, they're one of the establishing movie monsters. What do you think it is, about them that has, made them last? Because I mean, like zombies come in and out of fashion, werewolves come in and out of fashion. Mummies have sort of all but disappeared. But the vampire remains consistent. What do you think it is that audiences, find so appealing about these creatures?
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I think it's their versatility. You can tell so many different kinds of stories. I mean, and you can with zombies and some of those other creatures, but I think vampires, they can be dangerous, they can be sexy, they can be, very eloquent, or just kind of, I've seen interpretations obviously where they're more like mindless monsters, more like a zombie. I think that the mythology just lends itself to being bent and twisted to kind of serve your own narrative purposes. That's certainly what draws me to it. As a subgenre, is just there's so much room for variety, and you can update it or you can have it set in the past. It's just vampires are just very, flexible for all kinds of different stories.
I mean, sort of on from that, in the film, Luke starts helping Olivia, write her book, sort of make it, she's got this very old style Transylvania sort of setting, and he's trying to modernize it. And I guess in a way that's sort of, reflecting, what you yourself are doing with the script. You're trying to bring these, vampires into the modern. Can you, without too many spoilers, can you, tell us how your vampires might be different to some that we've seen before?
Yes, I definitely knew going in that I wanted a somewhat modern take on vampires, and not to be too winky meta, but these are definitely vampires that are aware of their own celebrity and their own depictions in media. And I thought that would be very interesting, especially, it's kind of perfect matching a vampire with someone who writes about vampires and might have a lot of wrong-headed ideas about them. Whereas I think from Luke's perspective, he's very frustrated with kind of the classical view of them. And he's very gung-ho about, making them cool and, not hanging out. And I think the way he puts it is not moping around dusty old castles in Eastern Europe, and yeah, it was just fun to kind of play those characters off against each other, because Dennice's character Olivia very much represents this sort of purist kind of classical Bram Stoker view of vampires, whereas Luke is very much the edgy modern one of the two.
I mean, I guess if you sort of extrapolate, that scenario out, it's the world is unfortunately based on stereotypes. So in the film it's vampires and humans, but you can extrapolate that out to people from different cultures being portrayed in a certain way in the film. So I guess that must have also been somewhere in there when you were writing it, that this is actually it's bigger than vampires and humans.
Yeah, and I think that it was also important for me to kind of show, even within vampires, just how different there's only 3 in the film. I don't know if that's much of a spoiler or not, but they're all very different. And I think that Luke, who's the central vampire in the film, well, to a certain degree, he can't help who he is, and he can't help his urges. I think that he genuinely has a connection with Olivia and is genuinely capable of building this kind of bond, whereas others in the film just are not capable of that, and just are purely view people as food. And it was fun to kind of develop those. Even Brock, who doesn't have many speaking roles, it was kind of fun to work with the actors and kind of dig into what makes each one sort of tick, and how they're fitting into this modern world that they find themselves in.
I mean, we can't really sit here and talk about vampires without, especially with how many sort of nods there are in the film, without discussing what are some of your favorite vampire films.
Oh yeah, I mean, I mentioned The Lost Boys and Fright Night. Those are 2 that I really love. But I grew up with really like going through all the classics, like the Hammer horror films, and Bela Lugosi's Dracula. I think in terms of more modern ones, Let the Right One In is one that I love. What We Do in the Shadows, of course. And again, like, these are all, it just speaks to how I keep saying this, but just how flexible the vampire genre is, that you can have these very, very different stories, all portraying essentially the same, supernatural creature, but they're so different. Some lean more into comedy, which I think is more my taste. I do like the dark comedy that's inherent in vampires. I think it's very difficult to play them straight, especially nowadays, since we've been exposed to so many of them. But I think if I had to pick 2, it would be The Lost Boys and Fright Night. Those are 2, the original Fright Night. Those are 2 that I just have watched so many times, and I just love. And I definitely, when Nico was asking me which vampire movies to watch, those were at the top of my list for him.
I mean, you can't really beat The Lost Boys. It's
it's a classic.
Yeah, it inspired my quiz team name. Funnily enough, the Lost Boys needed more sax, man. Is their quizzing name, and it's.
Oh, he's glorious.
You've probably seen it, but there's a music video that an animated music video that features the sax man from the Lost Boys and a load of other, like Blade and Buffy and a load of vampires.
Oh, I haven't seen that. You should send me that after this.
Right, honestly, if you like vampires, it's just so many Easter eggs, and it's not a bad song either. The name escapes me, but yeah, I'll pass it along.
Definitely send that to me.
I mean, so working in the background of the Olivia Luke plot is this shadowy Sevron group who may or may not be responsible for the ending of many mythical creatures. I'm guessing if you were to revisit this world, would sort of delving into that organization and how they work, would that be a route that you'd be interested in taking?
Yeah, I very much would like to revisit all of this, and that was I think for this story in particular, I kind of just wanted to brush on that, and I think if this is the only film that features the Sevron group, that would be fine. I'd be happy with that. But I do have very strong ideas about like how that whole organization functions, and I would like to explore it more. But I think for this one, the focus I really wanted to keep on Olivia and Luke and their relationship. But I think that Vernon Wells definitely makes kind of a good introduction to that whole secret society in his time in the film.
I guess sort of, the minute FrightFest, pass holders are there, trying to figure out what they're going to watch, how they're going to spend their 5 days of horror. What are they going to get by plumping for Red Snow that they might not get from some of the other films that are on offer?
Oh wow, that's a question. Yeah, I know that I'm sure there are other vampire films playing. I have a feeling that I'm not the only holiday horror film playing. I haven't seen every single thing that's playing. But I think that what we were able to pull off is just a very fun mash 'em up. I think it's very much intended to be a midnight movie. I recently saw it with a crowd at the Portland Horror Film Festival. It was my first time seeing it in a theater with a crowd, and it was just such a blast. It's really a movie that you can laugh and clap. It's very much built for the theatrical experience, which I've been missing so much, as we all have during the pandemic. And yeah, I think just if you want a fun genre mashup that kind of encourages audience participation, then that you should seek out Red Snow, is all I'll say.